vor, neben, hinter, auf, über. You might be thinking, what was this guy saying right now? So what I was talking about were the prepositions of location in German. These are used to tell about the location of one thing with respect to another. And these are what we are going to learn in today's video so that you can use them in your daily life and in your exams. And as I always say, that German is not difficult. You are good enough and you can learn German. So don't worry and just focus on learning. So now let's learn some location prepositions in German. So first of all, we will do a quick intro about what are prepositions. After that, we will go into the location prepositions which are used in German A1, and then I will give you some examples of how you can use these location prepositions in sentences. So let's start by understanding what are prepositions. So prepositions are a word or a group of words showing the relationship between things. So suppose you have this image with a table and a book. Now you can describe this image by saying the book is on the table. In this sentence, the word on tells us about the relationship between the book and the table. Similarly, if we want to show the relationship between this bag and the table, we can say the bag is under the table, where under is the word which tells us about the relationship between the table and the bag. So both on and under are prepositions. And since both of them tell us about the location, that's why they are called prepositions of location. There are other types of prepositions as well. For example, prepositions of time, preposition of direction, and so on. However, in German A1, the prepositions for location, time, and direction are important. We already saw the prepositions of time. I will link the video in the description below if you have not yet seen it, and you can go and check it out. So in this lesson, we will take a look at the prepositions of location, or Lokale Präpositionen as they are called in German. So what are Lokale Präpositionen? So as we already learned that Lokale Präpositionen are prepositions which show the relationship with location. And these prepositions answer the question of wo, which means where in English. So whenever you want to tell where something is, then you will use these prepositions. So let's take a look at the Lokale Präpositionen in German A1. So in this lesson, we will take a look at 10 of these. So the first one is in, which means in or inside. Then we have auf, which means on. Then we have an, which means on or at, depending on the context in which it is used. Then we have neben, which means besides or next to. Then we have vor, which means in front of. After that, we have hinter, which means behind. Then we have unter, which means under. The next one is über, which means above. Then we have zwischen, which means between. And the last one is bei, which means close to or at. The special thing about these 10 prepositions is that all of these 10 prepositions are dative prepositions, which means that we use the dative article or pronoun after them. But there is one condition, and that is when the object is not moving. In that case, we will use dative. Now let's do a quick recap of the dative articles. So here you see the nominative and accusative articles. So the definite dative article for masculine is them. For feminine, it is their. For neutral, it is them. For plural, it is den. For indefinite masculine case, it is einem. Then for feminine, it is einer. And then for neutral, it is einem. So now let's take a look at all of these prepositions one by one and also see some examples to understand them better. So the first preposition is in, which means in or inside. So we have this example of a cat over here, and if someone asks, wo ist die Katze? Where is the cat? Then we can answer it by saying, die Katze ist in dem Karton. The cat is inside the carton. And because carton is their carton, that's why we have used dem over here in the sentence, which is the dative definite article in masculine. Now we can also write this sentence as die Katze ist im Karton, which also has the same meaning. This is because im is a combination of in and dem. So whenever we have in and dem together, then we can write it as im. And this is commonly used in speaking as well. Let's take another example. Wo ist das Buch? Where is the book? And because the book is inside the bag, we can say das Buch ist in der Tasche. The book is in or inside the bag. And because Tasche is die Tasche, that's why we say in der Tasche. where there is the definite dative article for feminine. Now, in is also used if you want to tell where you live. For example, if somebody asks you, wo wohnst du? Where do you live? Then you can say, ich wohne in Deutschland. I live in Germany. Now you might have noticed that we have not used any article over here. The reason is that Deutschland is ohne article, which means it is without article. And there are many country names which are without article. However, there are some countries which are named with articles. For example, die Schweiz, which means Switzerland, die Türkei, which is Turkey, die Vereinigten Staaten, which is the United States. So if you want to say, I live in Switzerland, then you will say, ich wohne in der Schweiz. You see over here we have converted the article die to der, which is the dative form. So whenever you have a country which has an article, then you will convert it into its dative form. Otherwise, you don't use any article. So this was in. Now let's take a look at the second preposition, which is auf, which means on. Now this is used when we are talking about something which is on a horizontal surface and this object is also touching the surface. So let's take the example of this book which is placed on the table. You see that the table is a horizontal surface and the book is also touching the table. So we will say, das Buch liegt auf dem Tisch. The book is laying on the table or is on the table. So liegt is the conjugation of the verb liegen, which means to lie horizontally on something. And you see we have used auf dem Tisch over here to describe the book which is on the table. Let's take another example. So we have this sofa with a laptop on it. So we can say, das Laptop liegt auf dem Sofa. The laptop is on the sofa. And because sofa is das Sofa, that's why we will use the dative form which is dem Sofa. So this is how you use auf. Now let's take a look at the next preposition which is an, which means on or at. Now the difference between an and auf is that an is used for vertical surfaces. So for example, we have this mirror which is on a wall. So we will say, der Spiegel hängt an der Wand. The mirror is hanging on the wall. Because wall is a vertical surface, that's why we use an over here. And we use der Wand because that is the dative form. Let's take another example. So we have this image which is on the fridge. So we can say, das Bild hängt an dem Kühlschrank. The picture is on the fridge. And over here again we use the dative article for Kühlschrank, which is dem. We can also write this sentence as, das Bild hängt am Kühlschrank, because am is a combination of an and dem. We also use an when we are talking about specific places. For example, a train station. So if somebody asks, wo bist du? Where are you? Then you can say, ich bin an dem Bahnhof. I am at the train station. So in this case, an takes the meaning of at. And because it is der Bahnhof, that's why we say an dem Bahnhof. And just as we saw in the previous example, we can write this as ich bin am Bahnhof, because we know that am is the combination of an and dem. So this was an. The next preposition is neben, which means beside or next to. So suppose we have this table and there's a chair beside it. So we can describe it by saying, der Stuhl steht neben einem Tisch. The chair is next to a table. So in this example, we have used the indefinite article for Tisch in dative, which is einem. Another example can be if we have this lamp which is beside the bed. So we can say, die Lampe steht neben einem Bett. The lamp is next to a bed. And because Bett is das Bett, that's why we say einem Bett. And you see we use steht over here, which is the conjugated form of stehen, which means to stand. So we use stehen with things which are able to stand, such as this lamp. So instead of saying die Lampe ist neben einem Bett, you can say die Lampe steht neben einem Bett. So this is a better sentence formation. So this was neben. Now the fifth preposition is vor, which means in front of. So we have this example where a car is in front of a house. So we can say, das Auto steht vor dem Haus. The car is in front of the house. And because it is das Haus, that's why we say dem Haus when it is used with for. Now you can also use the same preposition when you are at somebody's home. Then you say, ich stehe vor dem Haus. I am standing in front of the house. Another example with for can be, Ich stehe vor dem Spiegel. I am standing in front of the mirror. Now moving on, the next preposition is hinter, which means behind. So suppose you have this bookshelf in your apartment and you place a sofa in front of it. Then you can say, das Regal steht hinter dem Sofa. The shelf is behind the sofa. And because it is the sofa, that's why we say dem Sofa. Now, if your house is behind a supermarket and you want to tell somebody the location of your house, then you can say, mein Haus ist hinter einem Supermarkt. My house is behind a supermarket. So this is also how you can use hinter. The next preposition which we have is unter, which means under. So we take the example which we saw at the start, which is we have a bag which is under a table. So we can describe it by saying, die Tasche ist unter dem Tisch. The bag is under the table. And you see over here we have also used the dative form for Tisch. Another example can be, if we have this bicycle which is standing under a roof, so we can say, das Fahrrad steht unter dem Dach. Where Dach, which means roof, is das Dach. That's why it is dem Dach when used with unter. The next preposition is über, which means above. We use über when the object is not touching the surface. For example, we have this table which we saw earlier. Now we see that the book is also above the table, but we used the preposition auf with book because it is touching the table. Now if we have this fan, then we see it is above the table and it is also not touching the surface of the table. So we can describe it by saying, der Ventilator hängt über dem Tisch. The fan is above the table, or the fan is hanging above the table. And as with all the other prepositions, we again use the dative form of Tisch over here. Now we have another example of this airplane which is flying above this land. So we can say, das Flugzeug fliegt über dem Land. The airplane flies above the country. So this was über. The next preposition is zwischen, which means between. And it is used when we have to describe something which is between two things. So suppose that in your apartment you have this sofa and this table, and you have some empty space in between which you want to use, so you put a chair between them. Then you can say, der Stuhl steht zwischen dem Tisch und dem Sofa. The chair is between the table and the sofa. So in this case, we use the dative article for Tisch as well as for the sofa. So for both the things you have to use the dative article. Let's take another example. So we have this bookshelf with books and somebody places a newspaper between them. Then we can say, die Zeitung liegt zwischen den Büchern. The newspaper is between the books. And you see we have used the dative article for plural over here, which is den. And there's one more thing which you might have noticed, and that is that we have added an n at the end of Bücher. And this is because whenever we use the plural form in dative, then we have to add an n at the end of the plural noun. You can also check my video on dative in which I give some more examples related to this. I will link it in the description below. Now going to the last preposition that we have, and that is by, which means close to or at. And one important thing about by is that it is always dative. So it will always take a dative article or pronoun after it. Now let's take an example. So we have this sofa and somebody places a bag close to it. Then we can say, die Tasche steht bei dem Sofa. The bag is close to the sofa or is by the sofa. And since it is always dative, that's why we use dem. And we can also write this sentence as die Tasche steht beim Sofa, because beim is a combination of by and dem. Now there is another use of by, and that is when we are talking about people, company where we work, or some activities, then we also use by. For example, you can say, ich arbeite bei Siemens. I work at Siemens, which is a company. And because Siemens is a proper noun, that's why we don't use any article with it. Another common phrase which you will use or hear is, ich bin bei der Arbeit. I am at work. So because Arbeit is also an activity, that's why we use bei. And an example with people is, ich übernachte bei meiner Schwester. I will stay at my sister's house, for example. So over here we have used the possessive pronoun for Schwester, in dative, which is minor. So these are the Lokale Präpositionen with dative in A1. So if you have made it this far, then I would like to say, great job, we did it together, and now I am sure that you will have no problem using these prepositions in your daily life and in the exam. So I hope that this video was helpful for you. As always, if you have any questions or any feedback, please let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for your time and see you guys in the next video.